A great year of book events at Book Passage. I hope everyone's staying safe and dry. I know it's raining here in the Bay Area, and what a perfect opportunity to just turn your computer on and listen to an amazing author and learn some useful skills tonight. So we are very excited about tonight's program. My name's Cheryl Bronstein. I am one of the event coordinators here at Book Passage, and very happy to be presenting this wonderful program to you. We welcome all of our loyal customers. Welcome back. If you are new to Book Passage, well, a hearty welcome to you. Thank you for joining us. We hope that Book Passage will become your primary source for all books. We do have two locations. We have our store in Corte Madera, and we also have our beautiful store in the San Francisco Ferry Building, and both stores are open 7 days a week. So come on in. You can come browse for your books. You can order online on our website, or here's an old-fashioned idea. You can actually call us on the phone and we will answer it, and you can buy your books that way. So however it works for you, we are happy to serve you. And thank you again to our loyal customers who have helped keep our doors open these past couple years. We really appreciate your business. Book Passage does have a very, very active and exciting business-to-business program. If you are a business owner and you would like to purchase books for your clients or staff, please give one of our stores a call. We will be happy to help you with very generous discounts. We ship all over the country, and we will make that process extremely easy for you. Books make the greatest gifts, and especially now with remote workers and on-site workers, having a book that everybody reads is a very unifying force. So I want to remind our business owners out there that that is a wonderful way to bring your staff together. And especially our tonight's book, the Stress Prescription. Let's see, I'm on a green screen. Let me hold it up here. This would be a wonderful book for those businesses out there, for your clients and staff. So keep that in mind as you're listening tonight. We are very proud to bring you this excellent programming. And just a reminder, if you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and this event will be archived. That means that after tonight, you can go back and watch it on our website. If you have friends and family who are not able to view it at this time, I recommend that you tell them to go and take a look at it. Again, it's a free event. They can go back and take a look at it at their convenience. I'm going to mention a few of the very exciting events we have on the docket. We have a very busy calendar for this winter. On Wednesday, January 18th, in our Corte Madera store, we will be hosting the New York Times bestselling author Pico Iyer, and he will be discussing his newest book, The Half-Known Life in Search of Paradise. He is a phenomenal writer. He is an even better speaker. And again, he will be in Corte Madera at 6 p.m. on January 18th. Sunday, January 22nd, we have Suzanne Pari and Jasmine Darznik, and they will also be in our Corte Madera store starting at 4 p.m. This will be a book launch for Suzanne Pari. Her new book is called In the Time of Our History. It's an amazing novel and an indie favorite. And again, these are free events. In order to find out, all you have to do is go onto our website, bookpassage.com, and you can see a calendar of all the incredible events that we have for the next January, February, March, and going even into this summer. We don't want you to miss any of the exciting author events we have and our classes. We have online events, in-person events, hybrid events, all kinds of things. It's a very busy community here at Book Passage. So again, don't miss it. Take a look at our website, bookpassage.com. At Book Passage, our mission is to enrich, engage, and inspire. And Book Passage has been a Bay Area institution and, of course, a family-owned business for over 40 years. So thank you to everyone out there that supports us. We hope to continue to bring you books for the next 40 years. Well, tonight we have an important book to help with a modern day ailment, stress. Elissa Epel, one of our foremost stress researchers, presents a richly researched yet practical program for addressing the impacts of stress. And unfortunately, it's a modern epidemic in our daily lives. Dr. Epel explores the science of how we create biological stress in our bodies by our thoughts, our behaviors, and they often unwittingly make us sick, anxious, and depressed. And she provides the antidote in a clear, step-by-step set of practices that will rewire your brain and body to become happier, healthier, and more stress resilient. We can't eliminate stress, but we certainly can learn healthy ways to manage it. And the stress prescription helps us achieve that balance. So this is a very important book for everyone out there. And again, I urge you, after tonight's event, please tell your friends and family to look at it on the archive, because this is the type of book that can really change lives. Dr. Epel is a PhD in the internationally renowned health psychologist who is focusing on how to live well and thrive with stress, despite the challenges that we face personally and globally. She is a professor at UCSF and the director of UCSF's Aging, Metabolism, and Emotions Center. She is a member of the National Academy of Medicine, past president of the Academy of Behavioral Medicine, and serves on the scientific advisory committees for the National Institutes of Health. She has received awards from Stanford University, from the Society of Behavioral Medicine, and the American Psychological Association. And last but not least, she is co-author of the New York Times best-selling book, The Telomere Effect. The Telomere Effect has been published in over 30 languages. It continues to be one of Book Passage's best-selling health books. It was a staff favorite and remains a top recommendation by our owner, Elaine Petrocelli. She raves about this book, and we continue to sell it, even though it's been years since it's been published. So again, that title is called The Telomere Effect. Dr. Epel is joined this evening by Saul Rosenberg, PhD. Dr. Rosenberg is a clinical health psychologist and provides services and conducts research on managing stress, enhancing cognitive function, and preventing age-related cognitive impairment and dementia. Dr. Rosenberg is a retired associate clinical professor of psychiatry at UCSF. He is a dear friend to Book Passage. He participates in numerous times in our conversations with authors, and we gladly welcome him back. So please give a warm welcome to our Book Passage virtual stage. We have two powerhouse researchers who are helping to make our lives better, Dr. Elissa Epel and Dr. Saul Rosenberg. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. You gave such a beautiful description of stress and aging that I wonder if you should stay and answer questions with me, Saul's questions. And we're so happy to support Book Passages, which we love. And Saul, thank you for interviewing me. It's an honor. And I know it hasn't been easy.
Elissa, tell me, why did you write the stress prescription?
Well, that's a great place to start. And it really seemed like I couldn't not write it after being pretty much obsessed with the topic of how stress gets under the skin, what we can do to reverse its effects. For almost 30 years, that's been my main focus. And I love understanding the biology, and I'm especially gratified when we have interventions that work. And I'm fascinated by this constantly growing field where stress science and the science of well-being has really discovered, understood principles of this human body and how we can stay well despite whatever's happening out there. It's challenging, it's not easy. So it was a book that was planned before the pandemic, and it got me through the pandemic because I had at least a focus to try to, stay constructive. And it was my biggest hope that it helps people. So I've taken practices from different science-based studies and tried to really simplify them and make them nudges as part of people's day.
In your research, you've done a lot of work on the biology of stress. And how does stress get under your skin?
Before I answer that, I should explain my comment to the audience when I said It hasn't been easy for you to interview me, Saul, and thank you. One of the compelling reasons I want to talk about stress and have us all prioritize stress and emotional well-being is that we have always lived in a very unpredictable world, very uncertain. And we could feel that and taste that during COVID. We just, in the acute phases, we just couldn't even make plans. And there was so much uncertainty in the air. And that's what just happened to all of us in the Bay Area with this atmospheric river that came down on us. And so how do we live well when we don't know what's going to happen, even today or tomorrow, and we can't rely on a stable climate or a very highly predictable future? That's a real challenge that we don't think about much because we're so focused on stressful events and trauma. But that's the kind of medium we live in, is this this uncertainty stress.
Yes, my power went out, and fortunately, I was able to come to Book Passage to do this event.
So, Saul, I would love it if you'd be willing to share what that was like for you. Was that how big of a stressful event? You didn't know if it was going to go out?
I immediately thought, and I emailed to you, this is a challenge. I looked at the PG&E map, and the power was on at Book Passage. One of the things I love about your work is the metaphors you use that really bring home how stress affects us. And in the telomere effect, you said our cells are listening. What a beautiful metaphor for really describing how stress gets under the skin. Can you tell us what our cells are listening to?
Signals. Our emotional state is transduced into biological signals, and the cell is exquisitely sensitive to biological stress, and it's listening to the level of stress soup or chaos in the cell and making decisions responding to this kind of the levels of danger signals in the cell. So extreme emotions are easiest to talk about. Chronic states like chronic depression or traumatic stress, which is a very measurable biological state when we have this huge stress response. And so what that translates into are at the chemical level, stress, we call them stress mediators, certain, what's in the stress soup. We know these words well: oxidative stress, free radicals. So this is a byproduct of both being an oxygen burning being. So byproduct of metabolism, we create oxidative stress, but we especially create it when we're under psychological stress. We also create the stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol, and insulin goes up, insulin and glucose. We want to mobilize glucose. We become slightly insulin resistant or pre-diabetic when we're in acute stress phase. Not always, but if it's strong enough. And so these are all important messengers for different functions in the cell, organelles, et cetera, to listen to and respond to. And so the telomeres are very sensitive to the biochemical environment. And there's an enzyme called telomerase that my colleague Elizabeth Blackburn and her colleagues have discovered that is the dynamic protector, the yin of the yang. So as the telomeres become endangered with a lot of stress, the telomerase goes up and increases its level and protects the tip of the telomeres and even rebuilds the telomeres if there's damage. So telomerase is a stress responsive protective response. When we've stressed people out in the lab, we see telomerase goes up. Beautiful. That's because the cell's getting all those stress signals. We've created emotional stress in someone, physiological stress. Telomerase is like, protect the DNA. That is the most important material to protect, because once the DNA is damaged, that's what happens during aging. That's a big way we age. And of course, cells can either die or become cancerous when we get mutations. So that was a bit of a long answer, Saul, but that's how our cells are partly listening to our thoughts.
You've studied caregivers a lot, their biological and psychological responses to stress and how they can ameliorate that stress. Could you tell us about what you learned from those studies and what our listeners can do and our viewers can do to deal with stress when they experience it?
We and other stress researchers often study caregivers because it's such an overwhelming life circumstance. It's one where family caregivers typically tend to lose control over their personal life, and they don't have time to exercise or do self-care. And they tend to take care of their loved one as the very first priority, to the detriment of their own health. And they tend to be sedentary. They tend to have depressive symptoms. And so there are a lot of studies on caregivers showing that chronic stress of caregiving is affecting the immune system. It slows wound healing. It creates inflammation in the blood, or inflammaging, so a creep of inflammation over years. But that's on average, and not all caregivers develop that stress syndrome. And so it's been very enlightening to ask, what does resilience to chronic stress look like? What can caregivers do that will protect them from the chronic stress? And we've had many studies where we've looked at cell aging or inflammation and have identified factors that protect caregivers so they don't look like caregivers biologically. So one is exercise. For example, my colleague Eli Putterman did a walking intervention for older dementia caregivers, and 6 months later found that their depression had improved. Their levels of daily stress, ruminating about stressful things, had really gone down. So that's critical, because that's kind of how we create chronic stress, is in our head, those perseverative or ruminative thoughts. And their telomeres were actually longer than the control groups. So they had increased their telomeres. What probably happened is their telomerase went up and protected their telomeres, so they didn't have as much shortening over that period. And maybe they truly had lengthening. We're always struggling to measure things accurately when it comes to these, molecular structures in the cell.
When you talk about the value of high intensity interval training, many people think you have to exercise a lot to get the full benefits. But the research shows really conclusively that if you interweave short periods of high intensity exercise, and that could be just walking fast, within a longer period of aerobic exercise, you can get really phenomenal benefits. Could you speak to that?
That's right. There's a lot of research now on this HIIT, or high intensity interval training. It appears to be as good as endurance training. It appears in some cases to be better at some biological protection. So that's great for people who want to save time and be efficient about their exercise, if they can get used to the intensity. I talk about it in terms of mental stress resilience or stress fitness. So rather than just thinking of aerobic training, we actually can use a few minutes of intense activity to change up our mental state and reduce anxiety and stress within a very short period. We've been studying that in experiments, like 3-week experiments, and HIIT is as powerful as meditation in reducing stress and depression. So stress fitness is interesting because you can do other things besides exercise that also stress out the nervous system, like hot and cold exposure. But back to your question about what can caregivers do, what have we learned about caregivers? There's all sorts of psychological coping strategies as well. And one thing we find is that caregivers who tend to have positive emotions, particularly at the end of the day, appear protected from some of the chronic stress effects. And so thinking about joy and positive emotion and what creates that for you as a person is a really good focus for dealing with chronic stress. Another is, how much do you suffer with wanting to change this situation, wishing things were different, trying to control things that are out of your control, either your loved one's behavior or aspects of the illness. Is that something you've dealt with in therapy? Since you're a therapist, I'm always curious about your own insights and ways that you help people with these exact same problems.
Well, that's a nice segue into mindfulness meditation. And your book reminded me of a famous Zen story. The Zen student goes to the Zen master and says, "Master, tell me, what is the teaching of a lifetime?" And the Zen master says, "An appropriate response." I think as stress researchers, as therapists, we are constantly trying to help people not respond, not react emotionally, given our programming, not react in automatic ways, but to be able to pause, to notice all our feelings, including the positive and the negative ones, and then to accept whatever arises. And that training in meditation is a great training for dealing with stress during your daily life. You've done a lot of research on meditation, so why don't we segue into that?
I'm happy to talk about meditation. I'm still curious about this this common form of stress we have when we can't control an outcome, and we know stress is bad, chronic stress is bad for us. And so we stress about stress. We spend energy trying to control things that we can't control. And we also might be stressed about thinking about how bad the stress is for us. What would you kind of suggest for someone who's a caregiver, or worrying about someone else's health or addictions?
Yeah, well, you talk about dividing things into two buckets: the bucket of what you can control and the bucket of what you can't. And thinking about that and practicing that is a very powerful technique. It's something that you learn in meditation and then can be applied to the rest of your life. So, the basic instruction in meditation is you sit quietly, you breathe through your nose, which is much healthier than breathing through your mouth, and you follow your breath. And when you follow your breath, thoughts arise: positive thoughts, negative thoughts, sensations. And the idea of meditation is to accept whatever comes, including all the negative feelings. And then, as you've talked about in your book, what's really powerful in meditation is when you can accept whatever arises, including the negative, because it passes. Everything changes, including our worst thoughts. They'll come back again, but you can let go of them. And practicing that letting go, accepting what's there and letting go is the kind of the basic unit almost of attentional control. And you talk a lot in the book about attention is our most precious limited resource. Controlling attention is one of the basic things you learn to do in meditation. And after you learn to control your attention, you can then accept whatever's arising and bring that energy to your life.
Exactly. You just, hit the nail on the head. It's just so important for us to allow and release and accept. And you talked about acceptance in the moment of the experience, negative emotions, negative thoughts. And I want to take this moment to talk about acceptance of a life situation like that we can't change, like caregiving. And maybe we can just take a moment and close our eyes and really think about how that applies to each one of us who are listening. We all have situations in our life that we wish were different, that we try to resolve, solve, wish away, and we can't. And so caregiving is one example. Could be, someone else's behavior we can't change, some outcome. We can do everything within our control to to make certain things happen, but we of course can't control outcomes. And we talk a lot about not being attached to outcomes, only to what we can control. So I'd like to have everyone think of something in their life that really does weigh on them, that you tend to spend mental energy on, or I like to say it's taking up a lot of your mental real estate. We might not be aware of that, but we're often carrying around unconscious stress from things we care about but cannot solve. And so we can close our eyes and we can identify the weight that we're carrying. We each carry so many burdens because we love, because we care. And we might feel it in our body. We might feel tension, tightness, pressure, because we store this striving, this suffering in our body. It's maybe helpful to think of how in this situation, when we're feeling tense, anxious, stressed about it, when we're trying to change it, solve it, we're pulling on a rope that's attached to a brick wall. And when we exert all of this energy pulling on this fixed rope, we can get burned, our hands can chafe, we can feel exhausted. What will it feel like if you gently release the rope? Just for now. And then breathing into some of this tension that we hold and releasing it, and really just letting ourselves believe right now we can let go. We can release this burden. Reality is as it is, exactly as it is right now. The brick wall is still there for now, but your hands are free, freed up to take care of yourself or problem solve something you can control. You might think of taking that burden, that heavy situation, thinking of it as a brick, a suitcase of bricks. And maybe you want to just gently put the bricks down. It's another metaphor you can try on and see if that's another way to let go for now. And we can come back to this room together and just remind ourselves periodically, we don't have to carry around so much of this unconscious stress. And checking into the body is a really great way of noticing this accumulated burden of carrying. And we can put it down. It'll come back, it'll be there, and we can put it down again.
Thank you. That was wonderful. You mentioned in your book about ways to start your day as well as ways to end it. Could you talk about that?
In contemplative practices, including Buddhism, often these practices in the morning and before bed are very important. It's like a sacred time to have devotional practice, to they're windows of transformation, they're transition times. And that's often when people meditate or say prayers or vows. And in our research, when we're studying biology and our nervous system and cortisol, these waking feelings, feeling overwhelmed, or waking up feeling joy, waking up feeling uncertainty, that the day's unpredictable, these matter. We find relationships between these waking mental states and how much, for example, one's cortisol goes up. and it kind of sets the trajectory for the day. So it's just a beautiful moment for us to use a short practice to refocus our mind from the to-do list, the demands. The body's asking, how much energy do I need right now? How hard is today going to be? There's all this anticipation in that short period after waking up when it decides how much glucose and cortisol is going to start pouring out. So we can take those moments to reassure ourselves that we can have ease, joy, and refocus our attention on something we're looking forward to, something that we're grateful for. Those are both ways that we can kind of quickly change our mindset toward the positive. Sensory experiences are another lovely way. Furry pets, hugging a family member, doing a mind-body exercise. So many ways to kind of shift us from that threat alert mode that might be a little bit over-exaggerated. Especially after COVID, we're all kind of jacked up and hypersensitive and more reactive than we were, most of us. I say after COVID, we're in it. We're in this uncertain, murky stage. We still have uncertainty.
You mentioned a very powerful breathing practice, which is a wonderful way to de-stress when acute stress occurs. I wonder if you could share with our listeners the 4-6-8 breathing practice. It's such a practical tool to have in your toolbox when you're stressed.
Yes, absolutely. I'm super excited about breathing practices because they're such a direct way for us to shift our nervous system from the more sympathetic tone, stress arousal, to more of a parasympathetic, and possibly increase our heart rate variability, depending on the type of breathing practice. Breathing is really complex. Many of you have read James Nestor's book, Breath. And what we want to understand and really know is, first of all, as breathing through the nose, as you mentioned, breathing through the nose is helpful and important. We want to not over breathe. So when we're chronically stressed, we're also might be chronically doing subtle hyperventilation. We want to breathe, let's say 15 breaths per minute or so. We all have a different range, but breathing quite fast might become habitual, and we want to take that down and slow that down. And that takes a lot of practice to do it chronically. And some of us monitor things like I do with the Oura Ring, so we know what our baseline is. And it's just a fun way to monitor our nervous system and our stress level. So when we do these breathing practices, we really can slow things down consciously, even for just a few minutes, to change up our mind state, to tell our body that we're safe when we're breathing more slowly and letting ourselves focus our attention on our body and our sensory experience. This turns on all the signals we need to create that shift in our nervous system and really relieve anxiety. So when we breath hold, we're also changing some of the biochemical balance. We want to increase, we don't want to take in too much oxygen, so we want to breathe slowly and naturally, as easy as we can. And if we allow our body to absorb more CO2, we're allowing our blood to also release more oxygen. So that's why this soft, easy breathing is a good way to change the oxygenate more, really. So another way to challenge our CO2, to make us more comfortable with CO2 tolerance, with having more CO2 in our blood, is breath holding. And so we've been studying things like the Wim Hof method, but the practice you're talking about is a really nice, easy, subtle way to add a breath hold into our breathing. And so that we're tilting us toward more of CO2 tolerance and more oxygenation. Andrew Weil has made this method popular. It's a yogic breathing method. So let's do it together. So we're going to breathe in for 4, hold for 6, and breathe out for 8. You can try that with us. And if it feels a little too much, you'll feel anxious instead of relaxed, then I suggest just 4, 4, 4. Breathing in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4. Okay, so get comfortable in your seat. And just notice your natural rate of breathing. You might put your hands on your belly, your chest, or heart, wherever it feels good. We're going to keep our breath slow and easy, not forced. We're going to inhale for 4. Hold for 6. And exhale for 8, slowly and fully. Breathing in for 4. Hold for 6. And out for 8. Keep going. When you breathe out, you might try pursing your lips. It slows the breathing and it increases that CO2 tolerance that we talked about. So take a few breaths trying that, where you're breathing through your nose, holding, and then breathing out through pursed lips. So it's a long, slow exhale. So when I have insomnia, I'm doing that, or I'm just doing box breathing, which is a 4-4-4-4. Breathing in for 4, holding for 4, out for 4, holding for 4. It's so symmetrical and so easy to remember when you're tired in the middle of the night.
Now that we're all so relaxed, this would be a great time to ask our viewers and listeners if they have any questions. If you have questions, please post them in the chat. There are a few, and I'll read them, and we'll take any that come in. So one question is about a very popular topic. Can you discuss the mind-gut connection? How does stress impact digestive health?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is a fascinating area of research. And there's a lot that we know and a lot we don't know about exactly how it does. But we now have pretty good evidence from both mouse studies and some human studies that chronic stress, as well as depression, major depression, is associated with altered gut microbiota. And so certain families of these bacteria increase. And there's a gut-brain connection, so that there's a lot of communication, and it can be part of the depression. It could be a result of depression. It could be influence of depression. I will refer you to Emran Mayer, who is one of the world experts on depression and the mind-gut biome connection. He has books on this. He has a podcast. One of the aspects of this gut-brain connection that we have studied is how we change both how we eat and what we eat when we're under chronic stress. And we know that chronic stress shapes our appetite and cravings for comfort food. And then we store fat more in the visceral area, where we have a lot of cortisol or glucocorticoid receptors. We call it stress fat. And we also believe that there's an immediate calming effect, but then there's some adaptation or rewiring in the brain that can make us crave comfort food as part of our stress response. And so we have a scale where we measure compulsive eating, and we find it's very informative. It tells us under stress who is going to overeat or binge eat and develop more of that apple body shaped, the intra-abdominal fat. So compulsive eating is a target for us in our health mindfulness studies. So we've done several weight management studies with mindfulness. And mindfulness does not help people lose weight so much as it helps them reduce the cravings and the dysregulated eating or periods of binging. And then the most important piece of this is not the weight on the scale, but it improves people's insulin sensitivity. So it's really improving the metabolic health. And that's what we should keep our eye on, is how our glucose and insulin is doing. And so stress is one of those factors that's shaping, of course, our diet and our body shape. And then now we know that the microbiome is part of that it's also shaping the microbiome. And one question that is a current research question, we think we know the answer, when we have these cravings, who's craving? Is it just our brain and our reward area, or is it all those millions of microbiota that are calling out for carbs?
Our cells are listening to the wrong signal. We have another question about social media. There's been a lot of press lately about social media increasing stress levels in young people. Do you have any thoughts about that?
That's been pretty well studied, and there are a lot of negative effects on self-esteem, emotional well-being through social comparison. The pattern of watching social media that's most linked to depression is lurking, not engaging in social media connections, but just seeing what other people are doing without sharing. And we do think that that's a big part of the youth mental health crisis. There's so much that's changed in the world of, this Gen Z, et cetera, their social experiences being so much online and through social media and through texting. And we need the in-person contact and the ways that we can communicate and become sensitive to social signals and be socially rewarded and socially synchronized, particularly for positive connection, feelings of safety, that we're missing that. So the short answer is yes. The studies on social media show that people tend to decrease in mood, have more negative mood after they've used social media, even if they're not aware of it.
We have a question from Nick from our very own Book Passage. And he says, he asks, what does your book suggest you can accomplish in reducing stress in 7 days?
So that title, 7 days, might stress you out. So don't let it. It really is easy to read or listen to in 7 days. But in terms of implementing it in your life, I'm going to make two suggestions. One is to go to the chapter you're most interested in. Try that strategy every day for a week and explore. You're an experimenter on yourself. Explore what time of day, what dose, how it's affecting your mood, your sleep, especially if you're monitoring your heart rate variability. And we want to implement even just one strategy because they can all make a big difference, and we don't need all 7. And so it's more like maybe a 7-week book if you want to try to implement all of them. It's always a little fishy when someone promises instant change, but the practices in there tend to be small nudges that really do take about 10 minutes and that really can make a difference in either our bodily stress or our mental stress.
We have a question about stress being contagious. If your friend is stressed, can it cause you to be stressed?
So the short answer is Absolutely. Emotions are extremely socially contagious. Negative emotions as well as positive emotions. There are studies of couples, for example, and they repeatedly measure mood, positive and negative mood, and cortisol, and they tend to co-vary and to be synchronized. There are studies of couples, especially if you're a distressed couple. So that might sound counterintuitive, but you're more permeable and vulnerable to the other person's mood. We find that with our caregivers too. There's been just fascinating studies showing we synchronize in terms of our heart rate variability. So couples who start interacting synchronize very quickly. And my favorite set of studies are by Wendy Mendez at UCSF, who's looked at stress as contagious with mothers and babies, and has found that, if the mom is as part of the experiment, the mom gets stressed out in a separate room. She comes into the room, holds her baby. The baby's physiology starts synchronizing with the mom's, and it shows more of a stress response. But the opposite is too. She's shown that the calm mom can calm the baby. So there's something about the touch in those cases.
I wanted to ask you about something you write about in the book about finding meaning and purpose. That's probably one of the single best things you can do to relieve stress in your life. Could you talk about some of the research and some of your thoughts about meaning making and purpose seeking?
The purpose literature is pretty impressive. I think of purpose as the queen of stress resilience, in that we can go through a hell of a lot of adversity, and we do as humans. And yet, if we have a lot of purpose, and in particular sense of meaning in our life, that is stress buffering, that can help us keep stress in perspective and not go to despair. Sense of purpose is associated with longevity and lower inflammation. I'm actually here in Costa Rica today at a retreat center with lots of different lecturers, and one is Richard Leider, who teaches people about purpose. That's his main focus for decades, and really helping people find their purpose, whatever stage of life. So it's not just about finding a career, purpose, a big North Star, but rather that we can refine and shift our purpose, add purpose. There's small purpose. So when we wake up in the morning, we can really get in touch with our purpose by asking ourselves, what makes life worth waking up for? What am I looking forward to? What makes getting up exciting and gives, something that gives you some purpose in that day. So it's really not some big North Star. It's really a much easier question. And often helping people is probably one of our more biologically wired purposes that makes us feel good. Feels a lot of that, bigger purpose in life, as well as to relieve suffering, to be there for others. Let's see, there was a question from Chloe Martin.
That was a question that I had raised before and attributed to someone else. Lisa has a question about, is there anything I can do in the evening to reduce cortisol levels in the morning when I wake? Something I can do in the evening to prevent the cortisol from spiking too much in the morning.
Yep. So that's a great question. And what we do during the day really does shape our mind-body state before bed, which then shapes our sleep. And so we really want to think about winding down at night as a sacred period, and period of having some screen-free time, having some reflective time on the day to review what was positive, to savor it, and to allow ourselves to have that kind of dissension, like a plane slowly landing before we go to sleep for our nervous system. There is a book, a partner book to the stress prescription, which is called The Sleep Prescription, written by my colleague, Eric Prather. And his literally is a 7-day plan where you can tune up and improve the quality of your sleep and reduce insomnia. And so cortisol is one of those factors that is kind of built in there, doing things that might increase your cortisol only in the morning, like exercise, and having a period of worry that's earlier in the day so that you're not bringing in stress and cortisol into your sleep. So what I mean specifically about that, and there's a worry exercise in the stress prescription too, is to set aside a very discrete window of worry, where this particularly helps for people who are worriers and have a lot of anxiety, where you allow yourself to write down everything you're worried about and just go for it. And then you might even ask, and what's under that worry? So that you're really getting it all out, and it can put boundaries on the worrying mind. It can allow you a list that you know you can go back to, so you don't have to keep the worry alive in your head. And then when you start worrying late in the day, you can say, oh, I have that special time set aside tomorrow, same place, same day, or sorry, next day, but I don't need to carry this around. So not now, or that worry's already written down. So it's a way of allowing ourselves, not avoiding worry, but just keeping it in certain time boundaries. So Saul, you've read the book so carefully. I'm so appreciative. And I'm just wondering, is there a practice that stands out to you, maybe that you'll use in your practice or that you'll use personally?
I would say gratitude practice is number one. There's so much power in shifting your mindset from what's bothering you or troubling you or negative feelings to what you feel grateful for. And I have a way of really turbocharging that. When you can feel grateful for how you can help other people, you've really hit the jackpot.
Tell us more.
Well, when I work, particularly with young people who are looking for careers, they have this idea you should follow your passion. That's actually terrible advice. What my advice to people looking about what to do for a career is to think about your skills and abilities and needs, and to consider, given all your abilities and needs, limitations and assets, what could you do that would make the biggest positive difference for social welfare? That brings more happiness than material possessions. And when you can feel grateful about the opportunity to help other people, that's a wonderful feeling. And it's the complete opposite of the stress response.
That's so beautiful. I absolutely love that. And what if someone's so depressed that it can't think of anything or can't feel hope or the love of helping someone?
Yeah, for that kind of person, mindfulness can be really helpful in just accepting the depression and trying to let go of it by focusing on particularly the physical sensations of the breath. Meditation is a physical embodied practice. And we're so caught up in our thoughts and believing our thoughts and identifying with them that we sometimes need ways of decentering from those thoughts. And when you really focus on the physical sensation of the breath, it takes your mind away from those negative emotions into the physical sensations of the breath. The same thing is true. You talk a lot about in your book about walking in nature. That's something that's available to almost everyone. And walking in nature and feeling grateful for the beautiful sensory environments that we live in is a very powerful antidote to depression. Well, I'm grateful to you for writing this book. It was a wonderful experience reading it and rereading it. And I've been practicing many of the ideas in it, and I highly recommend it to our viewers. I think this would be a good place to stop. Thank you, Cheryl, for sponsoring this event at Book Passage.
Thank you so much. Yes, this was so much fun. Great questions, everyone.
This was wonderful. And I'm holding the book up so everyone can see it. It is not a big book. It is small, and it's actually designed to be very transportive. So you can keep this book in your car, in your purse, in your suitcase, in your desk drawer, wherever you feel that you can pull it out and really use it. It is a wonderful, wonderful resource. So I urge everyone to get this book at Book Passage. And again, we are so thrilled to bring you these wonderful, enlightening free events. And we can do it because you buy your books at Book Passage. So thank you again for your support. Just a reminder, this event will be archived. This is the type of thing that you can go back to many times. I know I've got a list of about 5 people that I'm going to tell to look at this event because they were not able to join us tonight, but they can really benefit from this information. And of course, they can benefit from the book. So one last pitch, if I have any business owners out there, anybody who is interested in buying an important book for your client or for your staff, please call Book Passage. This is the perfect book. It can really help people. It can unite and really improve your staff, improve morale. So that's Book Passage. We really, we strive to help people. And of course, Dr. Epel and Dr. Rosenberg, thank you so much for being with us tonight. The work that you do out there in the field is just incredible. We are grateful for it. You are constantly helping lives to improve, and we thank you for that. So thank you for joining us. And again, Book Passage people, we'll see you in the store. We'll see your orders online, or we'll talk to you on the phone. Thank you so much for participating with us this evening. Stay safe and stay dry. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.